Okay, Mr. Flynn.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Flynn. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Western Suffolk BOCES, and welcome to another in a series of parent informational sessions. So last week, I had the pleasure of hosting two information sessions for our parents, and we spoke about what the Western Suffolk BOCES reopening school plan looks like. We went into detail about the parameters of the plan, how we emphasized health and safety issues. That's singularly the most important question, the most frequently asked question of myself. What, in fact, are we doing to ensure the health and safety of students and staff? And when it comes to our special ed students, some of them have underlying medical conditions or issues. I've spoken to a number of parents over the summer, and I can assure you that everything that we're required to do by the state, the CDC, local health department, we've been doing in terms of putting in measures to mitigate the spread of the virus. In addition to that, we've been working diligently to try and provide the parents with the option of an in-person instructional program, a full 5-day program, as well as a full 5-day remote program, the virtual program that students have experienced over the past 3.5 months. I would encourage parents to consider sending their child back to school. The phone calls that I've gotten over the course of the summer was urging me to do so. And with the governor's approval, we're prepared to do that. We're prepared to put measures into classrooms that support measures that mitigate any type of spread of the virus. And we also want to continue to normalize the educational experience for your children. I've heard repeatedly from parents about regression of skills and behavioral issues. And we want to reopen and start welcoming back your children to Western Suffolk BOCES. And for those parents that still have concerns about that, hopefully we can address those concerns during informational meetings like we're having this afternoon. Next week, we're going to continue these discussions and invite parents to participate in informational meetings with our principals as well as our director. So again, welcome to the informational setting. Before I turn the meeting over to Nancy Wilson, our Executive Director for Special Ed, I just want to discuss several things that parents can do to support the process of ensuring health and safety of your child. First is wearing masks. Each of the parents that I spoke with this summer who called me emphasized how they've been working with their child to wear a mask. And that's singularly very, very important. We know that not all children can wear a mask, and we're accepting of that information. But where children can be encouraged, reinforced to wear a mask, we want to do that. We want to work with parents. It protects their health and safety, and it protects the health and safety of other children throughout the classroom, throughout the school. The second thing has to do with temperature checks. And if you haven't read about it, I need to share with you that the state is requiring that parents take temperatures of their child before they report to school in the morning. And it makes perfectly good sense to do that. The last thing we want to see is having students back up at a school entrance because we have to take temperatures of them. So what we're asking parents to do is to give 100% compliance, due diligence, to please take your child's temperature in the morning. If they register a temperature of 100.0 Fahrenheit or higher, they cannot come to school. They will not be permitted in school. And the last thing you want to do is send your child to school who has a high temperature and a fever. Beyond the symptoms of COVID-19, though, if a child's not feeling well, if they're sick, they should not come to school in any event. So we're asking you to please help us with that precaution. Help us protect your child by taking their temperature. And we've developed a means for the parents to report out to us about their temperature check. The other requirement is that parents have to complete the health screening questionnaire. So if you visited different physician's office, doctor's office, if you've been to some places of business, you'll see that in order to gain entrance, you have to complete the CDC's health questionnaire. We've put a health questionnaire in place over a month ago for our own buildings, that before you can enter any building, you have to answer all those questions. So you have to also complete the health screening questionnaire in addition to doing the temperature check. And then we need to ask you to report that to Western Suffolk BOCES, and we've developed an electronic system to do that by using an app. It's a free app to load onto one's phone. We'll provide our families with directions on how to do that. Or if the family would prefer, you can report that information via the internet using one of your internet devices to do so. But again, these are the important things that parents can do to help us protect everyone's health and safety in school. Wearing of masks, taking the temperature checks, and completing the health screening questionnaire. So those are three things that we'd ask you to help us by doing that with diligence every day, and that will enable us to protect everyone. So thank you again for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We look forward to continuing these conversations. If there are any questions that we haven't addressed for you, please pick the phone up and call your principal. That's why we're here, to address all of your questions, address your concerns, to let you feel safe about your child re-entering the school system. That's where we want to arrive at our conversation with you. So without further information or further comments on my part, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our very talented, hardworking Executive Director of Special Education, a wonderful, wonderful professional, a wonderful lady. She cares with the biggest heart about your children. All day, she works long hours for your children. We feel so fortunate to have her here. So Nancy, take it over, please.
Sorry for the swirling. Hope we are not making anyone dizzy there. My name is Nancy Wilson. I'm the Executive Director for the Division of Special Education here at Western Suffolk BOCES. I want to thank Mr. Flynn for taking the time and care to briefly give an introduction today and to build upon what's been shared over the past week through the parent information sessions. So I'm going to begin with my portion, which is done in a PowerPoint framework, hoping to highlight some critical elements and important points that infuse questions that many of you have asked with regard to the email site, as well as phone calls and conversations that myself have engaged in, as well as members of my team. And as always, we welcome your input, your feedback, and further transparent, open, honest communications. I'd like to start first here with thanking you so much for your commitment and trust in us. It has meant the world. The changes that we experienced back in March, the closure of the schools, was something that none of us anticipated. And it took a lot of hard work on behalf of the talented staff that we have, but could not have done so without the collegial collaboration with the parents, because you took on a role that no one would have ever thought we would ever see in at least my lifetime in the career of education. So your commitment and dedication and focused efforts were truly appreciated, and your partnership and patience as we continue to evolve in the process is something we respect and value. Thank you so much. Today's presentation or discussion points with you will touch upon the elements you see on the screen now. I will go over what is the vision that the Division of Special Education has, and then what has been the planning and preparation. Sometimes you do not always hear what goes on behind the scenes or what is transpired, and we want to be clear about that, as well as help you to understand the different avenues we have taken in order to help make sure that we have a safe and supportive environment for your children, as well as our teams. The health and safety measures will be reviewed in great detail. Then we will go into what does educational programming look like and what are the offerings that we have at the start of September 2020. Recognizing the significant loss, the changes that families have experienced on so many levels, as well as our staff and communities. We will touch upon the social emotional programming that we can offer and ways to be a resource to your child as well as your family. Then how will we engage in the different levels of communication in today's new environment? And then what are the next steps that we're going through? So the Division of Special Education Division, we always realized how fortunate and blessed we were to be able to work with your children. We recognize that they're unique learners, both from an educational learning standpoint side, but their social emotional needs, their management needs, physical needs, and that they require specially designed instruction. Although we're facing an unprecedented time, and we recognize that these are experiences that are new to all of us. Our vision with regard to their unique needs and servicing them in the appropriate manner remains the same. It's our fundamental belief that each of our students has unlimited potential and that it's the unified efforts of our expert staff, which include teachers, related service providers, those are your speech and language therapists, your psychologists and social workers, paraprofessionals, consultants, and then in collaboration and partnership with each of you is what makes that growth and that development and your child's journey in the educational realm a positive and rewarding one, getting the outcomes that we both want. Our hearts and our passion and desires are in the same place as you as a parent. We are committed to that within our division. And then certainly the health and safety of our students will continue to be a priority on a daily basis with our programs. We know we have to look at the health portion side in a different lens with the current crisis, but we still need to keep in mind all the safety measures that occurred previously in keeping our grounds and structural components safe. And we'll talk a bit about fire drills, the lockdown drills, and things of that sort. So our vision is we're here for your children. We will continue to strive to be the best that we can be to give that meaningful education and provide successful student outcomes. What has planning and preparation look like here at Western Suffolk BOCES, in particular for the Division of Special Education? It's been the ongoing review, careful dissection of the different guidance documents that have come forth, both at the national level, federal level, as well as the state level. Often you hear different acronyms, they're put in the parenthesis for you, but some of those included the New York State Department of Health. That started back in March. It continued with the June 8th memo that introduced us to measures that could have been considered for extended school year purposes and then are moving into this current school year. We work most closely because of where we're located and our region with the Suffolk County Department of Health. We've also monitored the Center for Disease Control and Prevention documents and materials and items and best practice. And then the New York State Education Department is really our governing body on the local level in terms of instruction and how to marry or connect both the Department of Health, the governor's office, and ourselves in terms of our practices, procedures, and ultimately policies. And then the United States Education Department really gives the underlying foundation for all of these entities as to the steps and measures that we take. And then, of course, on a day-to-day basis, we take in the information that comes forward to us from the governor's office. Just like each of you, we can never predict or know what is coming down the pike or what is going to be shared out on any given day. But what we can do is make sure that we are informed and aware that we immediately take in that communication and feedback and then reflect, consider what has been said, How do we reevaluate our practices, procedures, and policies? And what changes do we make? Always going back to the center focus as to what is it we need to do for our students, for their safety and well-being. And then the other piece here is that our administrative team, we have such tremendous building principals, assistant principals, teacher coordinators, so many layers of incredible souls that have reached out to their counterparts, that have met with their team, and that have given me their time each and every week throughout this summer in order to make things ready this year. We participated in statewide regional task force and planning sessions, including facilitating sessions for the state. All of that information and backward design, if you will, helped inform the decisions we made in crafting our response here at Western Suffolk BOCES. Planning and preparation also meant that we were working with a lot of agencies outside of our immediate team at Western Suffolk BOCES. That's what's referred to the interagency meetings here. This has occurred at the superintendent level. Mr. Flynn, who you had met with at the start of this meeting, regularly meets with all of the superintendents across Long Island, and then most specifically within the Western Suffolk cohort area. Then we have Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction meetings that Angelique Johnson-Dingle, who is our superintendent, invited myself to be a part of, and we've done that on a weekly basis and moved it to an every other week basis, where we're really drilling down and taking a look at what are the different guidance documents saying, what is the best practice, how do we approach this, and how do we make sure that we meet the needs of all learners. And then for myself, I've conducted weekly administration meetings with your home district, special education and pupil personnel providers. And these have really been collaborative sessions so that they can be informed about what we're doing, as well as to share out commonalities, and then to ensure that we're all meeting the needs of the students via their individualized education program plans. Outside of this, we've been a part of lead nurse meetings. Our school nurses have participated in those as well. Those meetings included not just Western Suffolk BOCES or our Western component district quadrant, it's also included individuals from the east end of Long Island, Nassau County, and New York State. And various experts have also participated in those to provide real-time meaningful information from a medical perspective. When we talk about consulting at the level of BOCES or regional associates, this is more specialized in the area of special education, where we have worked with Chris Soriano, who's the assistant commissioner up in the state education department, specifically assigned to special education, as well as Kate Milliman, who is responsible for the quality assurance. So all of this has been a very open, transparent, authentic process, and something where we want to make sure we've left no stone unturned. Whenever you're in unprecedented times, there is no clear roadmap, but we want to exhaust those efforts. So these are some of the measures that have gone in place, and this is taking place now and will continue to take place in the future. And then a final piece to note for interagency collaboration has been the link with various vendors and leaders in the field, so that when we're choosing safety tools, devices, equipment, we're responding to the different responsible purchases we're making, that they can stand the test, that they have a vetting process to them. And that's been a piece where we brought them in on site. We've participated in Zoom meetings. We've gone to different locations to see that in practice and to say, does that meet with the needs of our unique learners? Does it meet with the unique needs of our programs and our buildings? And then how do we make sure we can be the best that we can be? On an internal measure, the intra-agency planning is where we have taken a look at those guidance documents, the requirements, and then what do we do to go above and beyond. And that really began with myself and our building leaders, meeting with our maintenance and operation experts, taking walkthroughs, of the buildings, taking a look at the ventilation systems, the water systems, the building and ground infrastructures, taking a look at cleaning materials and what meets with the standards and the thresholds, how do they get utilized, all of those measures. Then food and nutrition, we met with Luann, who is our director in that domain, and I'll talk a bit more later about the actual practical implementation of how breakfast and lunch will take place. But what is the training needed for the staff? How do we change our practice to provide for less touch, less interaction? All of those, again, going back to the safety measures, and then working with our technology team, even those individuals here today that have given us countless efforts to make sure we can engage in successful communication so we can retrieve devices and materials that are set up to be used in the home, to be used in the classroom. And then on a next step basis, our buildings went to meet with their team members on a small group basis that pulled together committees that looked at what does it mean for arrival and dismissal? What does it mean for use of materials into a classroom? What does it mean for use of the nurse's office? A cross section of all parties of those responsible with professional licenses to make sure that we're doing what we can to be successful. That was teachers, speech and language therapists, related service providers that included occupational therapists, physical therapists, teachers of the visually impaired, English as a second language teachers, et cetera, as well as bringing upon outside consultants. And then our nurses were certainly a part of that. And the nurse group has also been in your buildings and going through records and files to further understand students and needs, setting up arrangements that could be successful, as well as identifying locations that we'll talk about in a moment beyond just the health office, but also the isolation area. Then from here, we are now moving towards the training of staff at the building level and providing groups and team members to begin to look at specialties. So sometimes this might be our crisis response team. It might be staging out classrooms and certain use of equipment that needs to be utilized in the classroom setting. It's also taking a look at how we were utilizing manipulatives, materials, assistive tech devices, and how do we make them functional, meaningful for the children in light of the current conditions now and keep those clean. And then of course, it's parent input and feedback. I've received many phone calls myself, certainly our building principals as well. Even when I was walking the dog, you run into some of our wonderful parents and they're giving us feedback on just what's been taking place for them in their homes. How has their individual child responded to remote instruction? What would they like to see in the school setting? And then our SEPTAs. Really that partnership, that community approach, the interactive open engagement is really the important piece. There are times where I know that you as parent would like more immediate communication, but we try to be very careful to make sure that the information is really understood internally and considered so that when we give out information or details, it's something that is meaningful for you and that you're not receiving mixed messages. And later on near the end of the presentation, I'll certainly provide you one of the resources or tools that we'll be utilizing to help you with more real-time accurate communication as well. Now I'd like to go into the health and safety portion of this presentation. And this is where a lot of the questions that came forward to me or that have been shared. And I'd like to hopefully give you a better level of insight as to what that looks like and what has been done. So our team, in reviewing the Center for Disease Control guidance, looking and consulting with medical professionals, and then receiving feedback from a cross section of our staff, have ordered extensive PPE, personal protective equipment, for both staff and students. We are going beyond the minimum standard of masks and just social distancing. We have also ordered items such as face shields, gloves, gowns that can be worn, goggles, a whole host of resources. In some locations, we worked with bicarbonate clear glass materials to be utilized for some locations. Staff will be expected to use PPE at all times. The minimus is wearing a mask. Although regulations and guidance note that it's whenever you're less than a 6-foot distance, we are going to take an abundance of caution where they will be worn at all times. Staff will have access to shields or goggles or other means that they feel would be appropriate. So for example, students who need to be toileting or on toileted schedule or assisted with feeding or have other medical needs may be utilizing gowns, goggles, and shields. Our crisis response intervention team may also utilize those as well. Again, this is another piece of our effort to not only support the students, but to support the staff. Student PPE, as you heard earlier, we are aware that students are expected to wear masks. We don't minimize the importance of wearing the masks, but we do understand in working with our unique and wonderful population, some of the individuals may not be capable or able to do so. What we have done, what I've done is spoken with counterparts, daycare facilities, schools that had small cross sections of programming this past summer to get a sense of what the response was like, looking at students with some of the similar needs, where they met with success, where were areas of difficulty, as well as working with my team to look at ways to educate children on how to accept or tolerate wearing PPE wherever possible. And so students will be expected to wear their masks, but on a case-by-case individual basis, careful measures will be taken to identify which individuals are not able to, and then also identify those that cannot wear it for medical reasons that exceed even working on trying to wear them versus those that we can build capacity to do so, that we could support them, reinforce and reward. And absolutely 100% you as parents will be a part of that process, and your meaningful input will be vital and carefully considered and given due weight. Training and support, that is going to happen at the start of school with all of our staff, following with CDC, the Department of Health, and Suffolk County Department of Health guidelines and requirements. There will be ongoing training, review, and checks. As further information comes out that updates that or becomes an improved practice, we will absolutely implement those, and we'll do that expeditiously. We plan to provide coaching and training in a developmentally appropriate manner for your children as well to accept and tolerate that. Mask breaks will be provided. Students will have those breaks at times where they are definitely 6 feet from another student. They will not wear masks when they're eating. They will not have to wear masks if they're outside and they're socially distanced and they're engaged in a reinforcer activity as appropriate. I say as appropriate because there will be times where the masks need to be worn, but through professional judgment and careful decision-making in collaboration with the administrator, those breaks will be embedded within the student's day. In terms of the signage requirement, we have signs that are developmentally appropriate that span the gamut from kindergarten through high school that we're receiving and that will be posted in classrooms, in hallways, in entrances, that will reinforce the healthy habits that we are requiring individuals to engage in. That includes wearing masks, washing hands, directional flow, and movement in and out of classrooms, through the hallways, the bathrooms, etc. Each of these will just be that gentle visual reminder for all parties. We all need that reminder. I'm sure there have been times where some of you get out of your car and you're getting ready to go in the grocery store and you're halfway there and you say, oh goodness, I forgot my mask, or my mask is not on me, and you go back. So that's all something that we'll work with together in partnership to be successful. We will not compromise the safety and well-being to the extent practical, feasible, appropriate, the greatest extent possible. And that's why we'll be doing checks to make sure these are in place. Continuing with the topic or the concept of health and safety, screening and temperature checks. Mr. Flynn alluded to that earlier, but I'd like to go more specifically into what that looks like for us. So New York State Health Department has required all staff to engage in a screening process on a daily basis. Within that screening process, it requires that a temperature is taken. If a staff member has a temperature of 100.0 or greater, they should not be coming to work. That is similar for the students. In addition to the temperature check on the screening, there are questions that relate to the items or the bullet points noted below. These are ever evolving points. They do follow with the Center for Disease Control in the New York State Department of Health. And right now they include the concepts, are you presenting with signs or symptoms of COVID? And we give some examples of what some of those signs and symptoms are based on the latest data that we have. Has someone you've known or you yourself been a result or have knowledge of being in around the vicinity of an individual with a positive COVID-19 test, or have you yourself had a COVID-19 positive test? Have you been to any of the restricted states on the list within the past 14 days? That screener will be done through a web-based type platform, an app that gets submitted directly to your child's building that will be reviewed each morning. We will have the capacity to know if someone has not submitted their results or if they have, and whether or not that individual received an indicator in some area for a yes response, which would result in them not entering the building and not coming to work that day. In terms of students and families, the New York State Department of Health has made it clear and required that there be intermittent screenings that are submitted by you. Intermittent will be defined shortly. There is not a state standard for what constitutes intermittent. However, we will define what that looks like for us and what is suggested by the Suffolk County Department of Health and share that out with you. And that will be as quickly as that is defined for us. In terms of the temperature checks, you were being asked, and that is a part of the New York State Department of Health requirement to take your child's temperature each and every morning before you put them on the school bus or bring them to the school by transport of yourself, or whether they are walking to the site themselves. This is critical because the 100.0 or greater is an indicator that someone is not feeling well. It's not a be-all and end-all that someone has COVID-19, but it is certainly an indicator that there's an elevated temperature and that there's question that someone should not be in school in a more public setting. And by doing so and checking this with your partnership, we are helping to support a reduce in submission of any type of illness, as well as keeping your child and the other children safe. So that is something we are going to ask you to do as per the requirement by the State Health Department. Now, we know that trying to vet out the students and that information in the morning is something that could take a lot of time. We don't want to leave that up to judgment. So we will have temperature scanners in each of the buildings as individuals enter during the day. That could be a thermal camera. It's not identifying individuals, but it will recognize those going through at a certain time, meaning identifying individual. There's not a specific database that exists that will hold a person's identifiable information with that information. It is just an in the moment capturing of whether there's an elevated temperature of 100.0 or greater or below. Then that individual, if it is elevated, will have their temperature taken through a second means. We have some that are wrist scanners, so there's no direct contact. We have gone into the process of entering into an agreement with an outside agency to contract licensed practical nurses, LPNs, at each of our site, and they will assist in this process on a daily basis. I'll talk a little bit more about arrival and how this is impacted in a few more slides, but this is an overview of what the screening and temperature check system will look like. The next piece, a lot of conversation or talk revolves around is the provision of social distancing. So this summer, we have carefully walked through our buildings, both myself and the administrators and members of their team, the administrators with the maintenance and operation team, their custodial staff, and other appropriate personnel to say, how do we make sure we provide for that 6 foot of social distancing to the greatest extent possible through all measures and activities that we engage in throughout the day. So that begins with arrival and dismissal. In many of our schools, and I'll talk later on about the individual building, parent, educational forums that are going to be posted that will talk about your individual location, like James E. Allen Elementary, James E. Allen Junior, Senior, James E. Allen Alternative, Brennan Middle School, Brennan High School, our alternate learning sites, Manor Plains, and the different settings we work within so that you could be informed about the specific nuances of your location. But each of our programs has looked at multiple access points to decrease the volume of students coming through at any one particular time. So there may be a rear entrance, a front entrance, and side entrance. Further, there will be designated areas for parent drop-off. Parents will not be coming to the door to drop off their students or your child. We will be coming to your car to support receiving your child and check in with you and the individual. We know that we're going to have to ask for patience, and we thank you in advance for that strength and fortitude to know that the movement and flow, especially at the beginning, will be delayed comparative to maybe what you had experienced in the past. So buses will be dismissed and departed, I should say, and the students will be walked into the building bus by bus with 6 foot of distance spacing, and that staggered schedule will go into the next buses or sequence of cars. The same will happen for dismissal. There'll be staggered dismissal. Some of our buildings have alternate school times. We are finalizing the times, and we will let you know that as soon as possible. We are also working with districts with regard to the buses, the volume of buses or number of buses that we can anticipate. That will impact arrival and dismissal and the way that schools will function. In terms of busing, I just want to add, we at Western Suffolk BOCES are not the contracted provider or the individual that organizes the transportation that a child would access should you wish to avail themselves through that transportation. That happens directly at your home district. So any questions you have pertaining to the bus or what happens on the bus really needs to go back to your home district and to their transportation department. Some districts do have their own buses. Some districts contract with different agencies. I can assure you through our different communities, conversations and discussions that has been carefully looked at, and they have protective measures in place. But I personally cannot speak to that because we are not overseeing or in charge of that. Now, that's not to say that we won't work with the transportation team and work with your districts or provide support to the bus driver or the driver's assistant, similar to what you would have experienced in the past if maybe your student had certain medical needs, certain social emotional needs, behavioral needs on the bus. We will intervene and work with the team in that avenue. But in terms of how many students on a bus, how will the bus be cleaned, How will routes be affected? That is all happening within your home school district. We have no authority to intervene there. In terms of the arrangement of classrooms to support the social distancing, we have gone through with our maintenance staff, and your principals were a part of it, and I was there as well, using measuring tools, taping off areas, making sure the 6 foot of social distancing is in place. With regard to the 6 foot of social distancing, I want to be clear that that's from student to student. We do not social distance staff from providing quality required instruction to the children. So in other words, some of your children require the support of a paraprofessional or a one-to-one nurse. Some of that requires hand-over-hand assistance, refocusing cues. Some of it requires modeling, a whole host across a continuum. And you as parents know that most intimately. The individual, the adults, the professionals will be wearing masks and other PPE equipment, but they will not be 6 feet from your child for instructional purposes. I just want to be clear about that because we need to make sure that we are also providing your child's educational, social, emotional, physical, and well-being needs on a day-to-day basis. And that does require close contact at times, careful close contact time. But of course, whenever possible, even for instruction, we will seek to respect that 6 foot of distancing. However, at no time will your student be with another student within that 6 foot barrier. Could students pass in a hallway? Could students get up out of their seat in a room spontaneously by natural course of action? Absolutely, that could happen, but we have the staff to work to redirect, refocus, re-engage, or measures to provide a break for a student that needs to get up and moving. So no, anyone, any district, any area would not be fully truthful if they said at all times you can maintain 6 foot of distancing. These are children that we are talking about, and they're learning what 6 feet of distance mean. So for a spontaneous moment, but it would never be for an extended period of time, 10 minutes or greater, none of those pieces. So I hope that's clear, but if it's not, certainly feel free to contact your building administrator or certainly myself. Bathroom use, some of our bathrooms are single use. Some of them do have multiple stalls. The 6 foot rule will be in place where partitions and dividers that can allow for safe use are in place. That will happen. Again, your buildings will have individual plans for this. We do recognize that that makes a unique challenge when it comes to students that are on toileting schedules or when there are emergencies. That may occur with the need for bathroom. There may be a delay in getting that need met. We will do our very best. We will work through the practical nature, but that is another area that will certainly be a challenge. But we want to make sure it's healthy, that it's clean, that it's safe, that it allows for social distancing. So we are moving to non-touch surfaces to the extent we can. And making sure that the use is safe. When students are washing their hands, if there are 2 sinks, students will not be side by side washing their hands. It will be one student and then another. There will be close supervision and guidance for students. In some locations, we do have the bathroom monitors that will watch the flow of one student in at a time. For those that don't have the bathroom monitors, that's because they have the individualized direct support of an adult. So they're knocking up the door, checking for individuals who are in, and communication. And there's signage that will outline that procedure as well. Traffic flow and movement within the building. So we will look at directionality, ways that we go in and out of rooms, ways that halls are flowing to the right side, to the left side. There will be stop checks to say, are you maintaining your 6 foot of distance? Almost like traffic light type of ideas, gestures by staff. Okay, have your group move through. We're going to wait. This group moves through. So there'll be the use of gestures as well as verbal cues amongst staff and with the students in order to practice a safe flow. Health office and isolation room, I would like to share that they are 2 different locations. Although the New York State Department of Health, CDC, and Suffolk County Department of Health do not require you to have a separate room for isolation purposes, at Western Suffolk BOCES, we believe that that was a priority, that that was another means of importance and going above and beyond. So each of our special education locations will have its traditional health office that will service our students for their daily healthcare needs, such as medication administration, health checks, bumps, bruises, tube feedings, all of those procedures that come into play. The general day-to-day care for students will occur in the health office, and that is staffed by a nurse. Our isolation rooms, on the other hand, are a separate location that after an individual either arrives, a student, I shouldn't say an individual, if a student arrives with 100.0 temperature or higher, and they came from the bus, they will have their temperature taken for a second time. They will report to the room to be evaluated. And if they are showing the COVID-like symptoms or that elevated temperature, they will be placed in the isolation room. It sounds cold, but it's not. It's a room that is just warm, welcoming, like another classroom where the student your child will remain until they are picked up. The licensed practical nurse will be there, the LPN, which is a nurse, will be there. Students will be supervised at all times. I really need to impress upon our need for your shared partnership and collaboration and cooperation with not sending your children to school if they are sick, as well as should they become sick or show signs of becoming sick during the day, come and pick them up as immediately as you can. When you do that, you help us sustain a healthy environment. You help us make sure we can decrease any spread of any illness or disease. And you make sure that we abide by the guidelines that are put before us. So I want to thank you in advance for that. Another change you will notice is that visitors and building access will be minimized. So individuals coming on site is going to be greatly reduced. That includes district personnel, it includes parents and families, it includes outside vendors, it includes individuals that used to come on site to do training for staff, consultants, etc. Any visitor that does come to the school for any necessary needs, so our consulting psychiatrists, our medical doctor, that we have other individuals that are required and necessary for the servicing of our students, one-to-one nurses, etc., will go through a process of the screening similar to what you heard earlier, except it'll be paper. So for example, they will go through the temperature screening scanner. If an elevated temperature, will be checked a second time. If they have a temperature, they will be asked to leave. After the temperature is taken, they will be asked the screening questions. And then after they go through that vetting process, then they will be permitted into the school building. Okay, again, all health safety precautions. Gathering, events, extracurricular activities. I apologize for the spelling error I just noticed here. But those are all going to be omitted right now. We are not looking to have any large groups. We want to minimize the number of people in our buildings, and we want to control the variables that we can control to the greatest extent we can to support our students and staff. So that goes for outside individuals as well. Sometimes in the evening, our buildings would have been utilized, for, let's say, basketball gatherings or Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, all of those different types of events, or they might have hosted a conference. We are not opening up our buildings to outside parties at this time. It's not that we don't want to be team players or engage positively with our outside community, but we're going back to, we want to control what we can control to keep the building as safe as possible. On our next slide, I'd like to talk about breakfast and lunch. Depending on the building that your student is in, your students may go to another area to eat their lunch, but by and large, our practice as a whole will be that students will eat inside the classrooms. So desks will be wiped down just as we've done always. This is not a new practice, but we are using the cleaners that have been approved. And then students will also be encouraged to wash their hands more frequently and go through hand washing agents prior to eating and after eating. They will be socially distanced 6 feet apart from their peers. The food will be brought to classrooms for many of our students, or brought to the students. There will be no waiting on a line. The food will be carefully cared for and meet with the industry standards through our food and nutrition unit and the training that is going on through our director in that domain. Students are not permitted of sharing food. There will be no open food that staff are giving out. Now, for specialized programs where food is utilized as a reinforcer, those are separately packaged items that are kept in a student's own container and in a separate location and only utilized for that child. And we will continue to engage in allergy-aware practices across all of our settings. On the next slide, cleaning materials, systems, and protocols. So our maintenance and operation team with our custodians have a system for regular building cleanings, regular daily cleanings that are more extensive than even what's transpired in the past, as well as knowledge of deep cleanings. Logs are going to be maintained for that. It is all in alignment with the Department of Health standards and expectations. However, we are also permitting our staff to have access to cleaning agents that are safe to be utilized during the day and while children are available to wipe down things such as doorknobs, surfaces such as desks, handrails, things of that sort. So high touch materials. Now, in setting up the classrooms, we've removed a lot of items from the setting in order to reduce anything that's high touch or that can capture germs, if you will, or whatever it might be. Rooms are a lot more spacious in the sense that you won't see a lot of furniture, a lot of extra materials, a lot of extra supplies. Shared materials and supplies, as you've seen with Suffolk County Department of Health and New York State Department of Health, is minimized to the greatest extent possible, practical, and feasible. So what does that mean? Things such as computers that may be shared, those will be cleaned appropriately before another student, engages with its use. Manipulatives, things that they use for learning, will be minimized to students, but those that are shared will be cleaned in between their use. Also, students will go through that process of hand washing and cleaning for any things that are shared. But very intentional, systematic, direct efforts are being made by the buildings, the building-based team, and the staffs as they prepare their instructional practices for this matter. We do know that by going through all the cleaning practices, social distancing practices, staggering of schedules, that when students are with us in person 5 days a week, that there will be time where other activities will go on to keep the students engaged while those practices will be engaged, while staff engage in the practice, the team engage in the practice, custodians engage in the practice. We have gone through our water systems, run our water systems and filtration. They are all in compliance. Ventilation and airflow, the vents and air circulation and the amount that comes in and out have all been assessed, modulated, and allow for the appropriate and designed flow that meets with the state standard. Emmett Urban is our director for the M&O team and has assured us of those pieces. The walkthroughs have taken place at the buildings with the custodial staff assigned to those locations, as well as with the building administrators. Now, I know there's a lot out there about opening the windows, opening the doors. We in special education have to be very careful about that. Not only is it a safety measure for outside threats, but we have students that elope. We have students that engage in certain behaviors, that have medical needs, allergies, are sensitive to different temperatures. So we can't unilaterally say that's a quick fix solve. So when windows or doors are open, it's going to be when we can ensure the safety and well-being of the child first and foremost. We do need to maintain a level of temperature regulation in the building through air conditioning and ventilation. And when you do open windows and doors, that can become compromised. So we need to be mindful of that. And then transportation and busing, I mentioned earlier, please, please, please feel comfortable speaking with your districts, speaking with their transportation team, and make sure that your questions and needs get met there, because we are unable to give you the specifics to what you may need, require to feel safe and comfortable for your child taking the bus. That really needs to be done with your home district. I'll go in briefly. We actively are engaging in training of staff now, everything from our administrators and support staff, select subgroups, as well as we have added an additional day at the start of the school year for staff development and training for our teams. The training is for PPE, about communication systems and protocols that are in place related to COVID-19. We are training with regard to the integration of technology in the classroom, as well as through remote learning practices and social emotional learning. Due to the pandemic and levels of supervision, we still will go through fire drills, stay in place, lockdown drills. We can't ignore those aspects because at any point in time, they can be a real threat to our students and staff. They will respect social distancing to the extent practical, feasible, and appropriate, and as well as stay in place and lockdown. Any event for a stay in place and lockdown that we can engage in measures that do not compromise the social distancing, absolutely, we will do so. Contact tracing, we have a responsibility as an educational entity to be a part of supporting the Suffolk County Department of Health and New York State Department of Health with contact tracing. We are not a testing site, nor will we be expected to be a testing site. Educational entities are not medical in nature. And you likely know that from your committees on special education. Even though services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, services you can receive for medical needs, our students are receiving those services for their educational needs. So we don't do medical services during the school day in that realm. So we will not be a testing site. However, we will take careful attendance of all individuals, both staff and students, who are on site at the building level, who are on site in the classroom, anyone who enters or exits that classroom, and that'll be a very controlled environment, as well as anyone that goes to a particular treatment or therapy area. Those logs will be maintained. Should someone show signs and symptoms, we can immediately take a look at who may have been in contact or who may have had exposure, what that exposure looked like, and then certainly, God forbid, if someone does test positive, we would be able to report that to the Suffolk County Department of Health and be able to provide them with the names of all the individuals that were within the vicinity or had a level of contact with such individual. The Department of Health is the leading force that guides our actions beyond that. We don't make individual isolated decision as to who should quarantine, who should be on isolation. We utilize the Department of Health guidance with regard to that, and that's through immediate direct communication. The same is true when we make decisions as to whether a classroom needs to close, a wing in a building needs to close, a school needs to close, or whether all of our schools need to close. That will all be careful decisions with the Suffolk County Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, as well as our local teams. Nothing is done in a random, careless manner. You will be communicated with in real time. Later, you will see a way to go into our system to be able to update your information, your contact information, your email, your phone numbers. That becomes more essential and critical than ever. But with having that information, that will enable us to get into real contact with you all as family. Nurses will be a part of our evaluation and assessments, and they will be a part of the process in speaking with the departments of health at the various levels. I talked about quarantine isolation. You know, the direction and the feedback from the health department and Suffolk County is that individuals that have had direct contact, based on today's information and data, individuals who have had direct contact with an individual that has a positive test for COVID-19 will be expected to quarantine for 14 days. An individual that has the positive test go into isolation, and then there are measures that are monitored and taken by the health department that will help determine when you are cleared to return. Okay, please note that whether you're in quarantine or you're in isolation, educational instruction will happen during these times, and I will share a little bit about what that looks like in a short moment. Okay. Educational programming in person. Based on all the hard work, effort, and diligence that's been done behind the scenes, and the care and planning and securing the needed PPE and other materials, Western Suffolk BOCES believes and feels confident that we should be and can be welcoming back our students in a safe environment. We do recognize it's a personal choice and decision with regard to families. We make no judgment and we respect all. Everyone's experienced so much through this time, but Western Suffolk BOCES is prepared and will be providing in-person educational programming and servicing full day, 5 days a week, starting September 9th. That Wednesday, September 9th start date is a change. That is because we are utilizing September 8th as another training day for our staff. So our staff come in 2 days the week prior, and we will utilize the September 8th, that Tuesday, as another training date. And what we have done is on the school calendar, we have now made June 1st, which would have been a potential snow day, a full day of programming for students in school. So arrival and dismissal, just briefly, but there'll be busing zones at multiple locations depending on your particular school. And parent drop-off will have its own particular quadrant. It will be staggered. Students will emerge in a physically distanced framework. There is supervision of adults at all times during this process. Classroom arrangement, student desks have been arranged at 6-foot distance. That's been measured, and there will be tape and markers that designate that area. The desks will all face in the same direction, which reminds you of traditional rows, if you will. They might be staggered off to the side and front, but there's not where any student is facing each other or in the direction of another individual in a face-to-face format. Non-essential furniture and materials have been removed from the classroom to decrease contact, touch elements, and to minimize the housing of any more materials than necessary. In terms of how students are grouped, we have students grouped in cohorts and staff to the extent appropriate. Cohorts are really meaning there's a set group of students that will go about their day together. So if you are in a classroom, let me go back for a moment. To make social distancing happen in some of our classrooms at certain sites, we reduce the number of students in the classroom. So although special education classes typically are smaller in nature and size, we have even reduced many of them further as appropriate to ensure that we are able to keep that 6 foot of distance from student to student. So an example of that, if a classroom typically could have up to 8 students, but we could not successfully keep the desks 6 foot apart from one another, it may have reduced down to 6 students in that classroom. So in terms of the spacing, I think that's prudent to know, because it also allows for the additional staff, such as paraprofessionals or related service providers that are a part of the cohort, to be present in the classroom as well, trying not to compromise one another's space. So the cohort groups are the same group of students, are with each other throughout their day to the greatest extent appropriate. So those cohort groups are static to the greatest extent appropriate. I'm using that term a lot, greatest extent appropriate, because everything becomes a case-by-case, unique need basis for a student. So for example, if a student is receiving physical therapy services or adaptive educational services, those can't be provided in the classroom. So it goes beyond that static cohort classroom to move to maybe a gym or a therapist's office. So students will go to the therapist's office, but there may be a student from another classroom that goes to that office at another time. However, we are also cohorting our staff to the greatest extent possible. So if I'm a speech and language therapist, before I might have worked amongst 6 or 7 teachers in order to service select students from those classes, I may only be working amongst 2 classrooms. So now my interaction is reduced to isolated locations and static location. It becomes reduced, again, for the safety of the students as well as to the staff to the extent possible. And it also helps with that contact tracing. The only individuals that for the most part cannot cohort to an extent are individuals that are singletons, our administrators, our teacher coordinators, our consultants, our nurses. They will see the whole population of the school. But we've gone to extensive measures to limit the amount of contact students have with each other's students as well as with adults to the extent appropriate. Encore area subjects such as your physical education, art, and music, those are other experts and important personnel, ENL and Spanish. Some of those services will be pushed into the classroom to take place or happen. When weather is clear and the activities are appropriate and we can use the outside domain, we will certainly look to do that for activities. But for the most part, they will occur within the classroom. Static and decreased movement and transitions. Whenever possible, staff will come to the classroom as opposed to whole class moving. That's the same for lunch, the same for going out to recess or going to a special area. Wearing of masks, we discussed that earlier. Again, masks will be worn by professionals and staff at all times. Students will be encouraged to wear their masks. Those that have medical, social, emotional, sensory issues that are unable to do so on a case-by-case basis in consultation with families will not have to wear their masks. And we will take a look at other measures that we could take. You can send your child in with their mask, but our sites will also have the appropriate PPE in order for them to wear in case they forget. All right. The next piece, instructional delivery and implementation of the individualized education program plan. We know that as much as you work so hard, so diligent as parents to support your child with their remote learning, we understand that it's impossible to replicate what goes on in school and that our students will have experienced levels of regression or fallback or have missed gaps in terms of where they were before they were with us to where they are now. So benchmarking and baseline data will be gathered at the start of the year. We're not assuming that students are coming back to us looking the very same as when they left us, and we're prepared for that. We're prepared for doing what we call spiraled instruction, meeting the student where they are at as they come to school starting September 9th, and then building on their abilities. We are carefully planning review, reteaching, and practice of concepts that are previously taught, so nothing's an assumption, and that we can help students to feel successful, celebrate those successful accomplishments, and build on that. Success builds success, and that's our target. We want students to feel welcomed, supported, nurtured, cared about, safe, and then the instructional pieces will definitely build upon once that foundation is set. The introduction of new material will certainly happen to meet with state standards, whether it's the New York State Regents Track Trajectory, Next Generation Standards, or the New York State alternately assessed standards and essential components. And then progress monitoring and parent communication will be ongoing. I will identify the different means that we'll be utilizing for that, but you will have a sense of where they're at. And we certainly invite your input and feedback to share what you're seeing with your student in terms of their transition back. On our next slide, we talk about the instructional delivery and implementation of those plans, and then we go into student materials. We are asking you to reduce the items that your student brings from home to school. If there are items that your student needs to keep in school, we're asking you to send them in at the start, and then we would encase them, we would keep them, whether it's a plastic container or based on unique needs, based on student abilities, those will be kept separate and sustained for your individual child's use, okay? We will take care of that storage. We prefer not to have new items, various items come in from home just so we can maintain the cleanliness. The materials used in the classroom and related service sessions that are common, shared use, books, computers, manipulatives, adaptive equipment. We're trying to work towards having individual, but certainly some will have to be shared. Those will be cleaned. We will make sure that care is taken before the next student utilizes it, even if that means someone's using computers in the morning and another's using in the afternoon. Reinforcers, we're getting creative. Your teams are getting creative to look at different ways for reinforcement. In the past, sometimes it was going to the gym to play basketball or any host of activities, a break, movement through the halls. You know, many of those now become less of an option or not an option at all. So we're looking at those motivators and reinforcers for students so that we can really celebrate the successes and make them feel good at their level developmentally. The access to PPE, such as gloves, staff will have access. And if we find that, you know, certain families may have, you know, the desire, that we will be able to work with you to help you feel safe. And hats, coats, we understand that those will come in, especially depending on the weather, and they will be stored appropriately in the classroom. Mask breaks, we touched upon earlier. That's a common question. They will be embedded within your child's day, your individual buildings, and more uniquely, your students' teachers will help define that for you as to specifically when and how they're being taken care of. Same thing with hand hygiene, both hand sanitizers, use of soap and water, all of that will be in place at the building levels. Social distancing checks will be done in the classroom, in the hallway, during transitions, during related service sessions. Those checks are self-monitoring checks for students that have the capacity to do that. Let's stop, let's look. Are we in the distance we would hope to be? Same thing for staff. And that way, by teaching these skills, it can also help your child replicate that outside of school. Reinforcement and incentives, we are open to your thoughts and ideas as to what motivates your child. We may have to look at different means. So what was identified on a behavior intervention plan or a management plan may have to be revisited with you because they may not be appropriate to utilize during this health crisis. Work study and work-based learning experiences. Some of you may have children that would have gone out to hotel sites, retail sites, restaurants, whatever it may have been to get their work-based learning experiences. Right now, we are not engaging in those activities. However, we're working on activities of daily living and in-house work-based programming, as well as working on what we call soft skills, reading skills, self-monitoring skills, all of those skills you would practice in the work force that sometimes I can't always be taught in real time when you're at the work site. That'll be embedded. Career and technical education, we're very fortunate and blessed to work with tremendously talented career and tech side here. Nancy Kelsey, who is the director, along with her colleagues, have done careful planning as well. Our students will be able to still access their 5-day-a-week full-time career and technical education program. For that, we do have buses that we contract with for the transport from, let's say, Brennan High School to Wilson Tech Dix Hills, possibly. And those buses have a very specific screening, cleaning protocol and spacing protocol to allow for the social distance that will be in place, and students will be required to wear the masks on the bus. Field trips, as much as we love, like, and appreciate them, they will not be happening in the interim, but we do have different ways to take students on virtual field trips, and that might be embedded in your classroom, and some of those are lots of fun. So out of every challenge, new experiences will emerge, and some of those new experiences will be positive. And I think some of those virtual field trip and virtual activities can be something that your child benefits from and engages in. In terms of a student, not attending the 5-day-a-week full in-person program, that is certainly a personal decision and choice. But I want you to know that we at Western Suffolk BOCES are prepared to provide instruction to your child through a remote virtual means, if that is your intention. So you may feel for health purposes, your child is medically compromised in some way, or someone in your home is medically compromised and you do not feel it is prudent, appropriate, or safe for them to come to school at this time, you do have the option to select a remote virtual learning experience. That will be provided by certified licensed professionals. It will be done in a manner that is within the school day, the confines of a typical school day. It will include a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. So if you participated in our extended school year summer program virtual learning experience, you will have experienced that. So synchronous learning is where it's live. There's an interaction. There's a give and take between the instructor or the related service provider and your child or group of students. That will occur on a daily basis within this setting, as well as asynchronous. So there could be posting of videos, practice activities, links to reinforce skills taught, access to different materials. Some of our students really need us to continue to provide packet work in addition to this environment. For some of our students, based on their unique needs, they're able to engage in live synchronous learning as a whole class. Other students are not able to do so. So we've provided for that based on the unique needs of our students, and you'll see samples of tentative schedules. I need to share with you, these are tentative, meaning we're still working on them, but they've been carefully thought out and they're very close to what we will be doing, but your buildings will be individualizing those even further, and you will be informed of that. Again, I thank you for the patience related to this process, because as much as we want to give you answers, as much as we want to be able to give you the information today, that your principals really would love to be able to tell you what class that they are in, who your student's teacher is, all of those different pieces. But we are finding out new information from our governor, as well as the state, that we are responsible and accountable for responding to. And if we tell you something and that changes, that only adds to a level of confusion and can compromise the safety and well-being of your child. So we thank you for the patience. We ask you to hang in there and work with us as we try to do the very best that we can to meet your child's needs and the needs that you have. In terms of technology and access, we work with your homeschool district to secure technology items. Really, that is the first avenue that we will go through to try to get you the resource should you not have it. Many of you who've already had a child attend school with us have experienced that. Our team did a survey. They asked whether or not you had access to technology in the home, including Wi-Fi. If there was not the access to the technology, we started trying to work with your district to secure such items. And then after that, we would then take a look at what we could do to support that. We are looking for equity. We're looking for there to be the ability for all of our students to have meaningful participation. In case-by-case basis, if that's a struggle concern, you need to let your building administrator know so that we could work with your home district and then further partner with that process on our end. The primary platforms we'll be utilizing are Google Classroom, Google Meets, and Zoom, supplemented with other resources that if you've worked with us in the past, you'll be somewhat familiar with, include Boom Learning, Discovery Education, Unique Learning System, Edpuzzle, and several others. Again, it's based on the individual needs of your student or the group of students within the class, and there will be family support to help you navigate this resource. Embedded within all remote virtual learning experiences will be levels of parent contact on a regular basis, meaning weekly, every other week, whether it's classroom teacher and or related service providers. In terms of our secondary students, there might be advisorships, almost like what maybe you would have likened to a homeroom teacher or someone that is making that connection for your child to engage them, to monitor their participation, ask them how you do and what do you need help with, what can I support in addition to the instruction. So again, depending on the layer, depending on the program, that'll be further refined and designed for you. The instruction, remote and virtual, will align with New York State standards, next generation Regents track trajectory, as well as New York State alternate assessment with essential elements. And the IEP will be delivered to the greatest extent possible. Again, we are not, and we do not have the ability to send people into your home. That means one-to-one paraprofessionals, an occupational therapist, or a physical therapist. New York State Department of Health is very clear with the required monitoring of the safety and well-being of all parties. We cannot judge or monitor someone's home, who's in their home, what their practices are, etc. Our services, we are more than happy and more than willing to provide your child with in-person services. And then we are, more than happy and willing to provide with remote and virtual learning, but we do not have a level of a blending or a hybrid. Our students rely on consistency, they rely on structure, and also we have to monitor very carefully who is in contact with whom. What is that level of contact? What does that look like? You also know we take a lot of pride in being transparent, open, and honest with you. We rely on supervision for the safety of our children, of the programming, the quality of programming that is done. When that leaves the school setting, we can't say what that looks like in the home. When you are getting virtual and remote learning, our principals and administrators and chief OT and PTs have the ability to join the session that is taking place. They are monitored. We have great staff, and we want to make sure we're supporting that staff to do right by your child, and supervision and support is a part of that. So we do not provide one-to-one paraprofessionals in the home, nor do we provide related services in the home, but we will do things through teletherapy and telesupport, which is recognized by the councils, the licensure agents, and is fully supported by the New York State Education Department. So you may also see project-based learning activities and family-guided practice may be in play. So the next slide is an example At one of our locations, we have about 5 different programs that we offer in that same setting. If you elected to do cooperative, home remote learning virtual, this is an example of what it looks like. It will not look like the same for all students because not all students have the same IEPs, not all students learn in the same way, and not all students can access in the same way. But we're doing the best that we can to the greatest extent possible to meet your child's needs. The next slide is another example of one of our settings that will have 4 different remote learning programs and opportunities. And then the third slide is another example for you to see. And, on surface, these might seem very simple, but the amount of time, effort, and energy, the alignment to standards, the alignment to the individual student IEPs that we looked at to address this took hours upon hours of development and creative planning. I can't say enough about our principals, assistant principals, and teacher coordinators that have really taken initiative and not taken one day of a break this summer to really craft opportunities that are meaningful, valuable, and rewarding to the greatest extent that we can for your children. And I hope you will see that from the bottom of my heart. I hope that you will see the level of care and dedication that exists. And I know that we have the teachers and related service providers and paraprofessionals that can make a difference for your children and can execute these programs with fidelity and diligence. The next slide just discusses the teletherapy, the means, the encore area subjects that will be provided through virtual means, advisories, and homerooms. Those are all discussed earlier. And then in terms of educational programming and remote learning, this is for everybody. This is not in-person and remote. Through our curriculum, we will be embedding in heavy levels of social emotional learning, compassion, and understanding. Things such as mindfulness, character education, trauma-informed care and practices. All of that will be an important piece in returning and connecting and building relationships with our children. We're fortunate that many of our students know us and we know them. However, entering into a new school year is very different than what it looked like when schools closed in March. As much as that was unsettling, everyone knew one another. They had had contact with their teachers already, their related service providers, and vice versa. When you start a new school year, it's new for everyone. So those curriculum development pieces, as it relates to social emotional development and learning and mindfulness, and taking moments to take a breath and learn about one another is really critical, and we're prepared to do that. We have, I can't say enough about these individuals that we work with some of the most talented souls in psychologists and social workers and our consulting psychiatrists, and the ways that we engage with our interagencies, hospitals, support care units outside. They go above and beyond during the school day, outside of the school day, to take a look at the needs, not only of our students, but of their peers and colleagues. We tap these resources and ask these individuals about their expertise, but they're available, and we're going to work with them to help support your children as well. So if your child is struggling socially, emotionally, or with their mental health, or feeling safe coming to school, we want you to feel comfortable letting us know that, so we can link with our team members in order to provide the support to your child and to you as well. We want to do what we can to be successful and to make sure we're there for you. And so the parent engagement on our end, homeschool communication, whether you're virtual, whether you're in person, will continue. That may be via phone contact, communication books if you're in person, behavioral data charts to and from school, progress summary charts, emails as appropriate. The means that works best for you and your individual provider will be worked out at that building level. The mode for meetings will look different for all of you. Committee on Special Education meetings will no longer be in person on site, but through means like your Google Meet, Google Classroom, or conference calls. Same thing, team meetings or parent counseling and training. There may be points and periods of time where it is necessary for parents to come into the school, and that will be carefully discussed. And significant measures for safety will be put in place. But by and large, we are reducing access to visitors and to families so that we can sustain the health and cleanliness and minimize contact throughout the building. So again, that's another piece. We know it'll be challenging. It might be unsettling at the initial onset, but we will do whatever we can to help you feel safe. Next steps, this first one is essential, and I'm really asking for your support and help with this. You know, we have been fortunate through an individual, Nancy Frischetti, to begin to create a page with regard to Safe and Smart Restart, a way to get communication out to you, to staff, and just updates that come. We want you to utilize this page. Many of you started by going to it to complete a survey that we had put on there several weeks ago. This website, own it, make it a favorite, do whatever it takes, but it's www.wsboces.org/restart. On this page, it'll enable you to have timely communications and informations that are taking place on a broad scale. It's also where you will see our plan and eventually where other information will be uploaded. We ask you to go there today if you can. The sooner the better, to update your contact information. Some individuals have shared they don't hear about what we call those mass global calls, or they don't know about a certain meeting such as today's session or Mike Flynn's session. But you can go to www.wsboces.org/restart, scroll down on the page and look for the link that says update your contact information. When you click on that link, you're able to enter your information that is current. And this is the information where you will receive those calls, you will receive those emails, you will receive those text messages. I can't impress upon you enough how important that is and vital for the communication and your access. You will find on there shortly, if it does not go on today, it should be there this week. You are going to be asked to complete a commitment letter identifying your intentions for your child. Are you electing in person or are you electing remote? We need to know that because that impacts how we group your child with regard to their class, how we provide for their needs and plan their program, how we engage and assign staff, teachers, related service providers, etc. All of that in terms of ordering supplies and materials. Those are so essential. So if you can please check this website on a regular basis and complete that commitment letter as soon as it's up, we will utilize contact information to send a mass calling that it is posted, that commitment letter, but that feedback is important. We don't judge you. Do be mindful that when you make your commitment, you're making it for at least a quarter, because it is not easy to transition from one to the other. So in other words, we're carefully crafting and spacing our classrooms and the way we're using space in the building based on the commitment letters. So that can't be changed in 2 days. So whatever you decide, you're deciding for a quarter. And vice versa with remote. We're trying to set up remote classes that are responsible, appropriate, smart for your child, and relatable for your child. So by letting us know your decision and choice, that will make all the difference for healthy preparation. In terms of if schools are ever closed, whether it is the Department of Health telling us it is, or it's Governor Cuomo telling us it is, we will go right into the remote learning plans. And those will be the same remote learning plans that students will be engaging in for the remote virtual learning. Individual building parent presentations will be taking place by your building principals. They will be posted up to that site, the BOCES.org restart page, where you'll be able to click a link, and that will give you information that's coming to you from your building leaders. That will talk more specifically about the building components. And you know, at the end of the day here at Western Suffolk BOCES, all of us went into the career of education because we love and care about students. We went into special education because we wanted to be those difference makers that find the pieces to the puzzle to help the children be the best that they can be. We want nothing more than to support you and your child through this very difficult time period. There's nothing we can't do if we work together. So your open communication, your honest communication is greatly appreciated. And we will continue to review guidance documents, continue to participate at the state level, continue to build our capacity here and engage in trainings and help ourselves to continue to grow. You've given a lot of time today. I hope that you found this session meaningful. It's not easy to find the time, but the fact that you did means the world to me, and I can't thank you enough. And it's truly an honor and a privilege to be able to work with your students and to be a part of their lives. And we do believe in a beautiful future, and we can do this. Thank you so much for your time. Am I done?